All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We've been looking forward to this meeting tonight. We have Lone Tree member Paul Malinowski, who is here tonight, has won several awards before here with the club, and really looking forward to the presentation tonight. Anyways, again, we've got a really good group here tonight. We've got a lot of people who made the trek here to the Lone Tree Civic Center, and Paul's got a really big audience that showed up here for us on Zoom. It looks like we've got over 30 people out there on the Zoom audience in that. So thank you, everybody, for whether you came in via Zoom or you made the trek here to the Civic Center. Really looking forward to it. I just want to go through a couple of other upcoming events that we've got here over the next couple of months. The next one will be, we've got March 6th. So the first Wednesday in March, exhibition night. For those who haven't participated in those before, it's a real good opportunity. Members can submit up to 4 images, any category, black and white, color, and so forth. But it's a good opportunity to present those and showcase some of your work. It's not really a competition. We don't judge them, but it gives you an opportunity to describe the scene, talk about what the reasons were as far as why you took the image, what interests you about it, and then also talk about any special post-processing or anything like that that you may have done. And we also open it up to the audience to just offer suggestions in that, whether it might be something to do with composition, lighting, or whatever and so forth. And that, just again, it's a real good opportunity, a learning opportunity, not being judged with scores, but I know, and in the past in that I've learned not just from my own images and the feedback that I get, but also from the feedback that is there for other images that get submitted. Following that, 2 weeks later, the March 20th, so that's a Wednesday in March, we have Lone Tree member Ben Evans, who's going to be presenting on hummingbird photography. I know he's submitted some of those and done very well at some of our competitions in that, and he has really interesting techniques for capturing hummingbirds in flight, freezing the wings and so forth on that, but really interesting techniques. So it'll be another real good program that we have. Again, that's March 20th. April 3rd, we have this will be our second competition of the year. This is a themed competition. If you remember, the one that we just had a couple weeks ago was open, and we had, 115 images, I think, that were submitted. So this one is going to be, again, themes. The themes for this one are motion and leading lines. April 17th, we have another presentation, and that one is going to be another Lone Tree member, Elaine Graves, presenting on lighting. And then that's going to be followed that following Saturday. I guess that's April 20th, I believe it is. And Elaine is going to be leading a workshop on single light source photography. For those who were here last month during our the last competition, I guess earlier this month for our competition, Elaine had some really good top award. As I give the ribbons out here in a few minutes, you'll hear her name a couple of times with some top level awards for some of the product type photography that she does. So again, an opportunity to learn from her will be April 20th at a workshop, and that's going to be here in the Civic Center, right? Saturday. Okay, great. Let's see here. After that, we have May 1st, we have another exhibition night, similar to what I just described earlier. Submit up to 4 images and showcase your work and describe those. And then May 15th, we have another wildlife photography presentation with Lone Tree member Carino Zaragoza, who's here tonight. So he'll focus on some, we have a couple of these ones that are on like birds, meaning hummingbirds, and tonight on bird photography. And so Carino will focus on birds as well as other wildlife. So that's what we have coming up through May. And stay tuned, we have some other events that will be coming up later in the year. July and August, we will be meeting so those will be Zoom only. Is that how we're going to handle those meetings? July and August, what it is the Lone Tree Civic Center, they're doing some renovations. So the Civic Center where we're at right now will be closed. So much like we did during COVID, we'll have to run those meetings and that via Zoom. But just for 2 months, we'll keep those going and then resume later in the year here with our meetings at the Civic Center. A couple of other things that wanted to bring up, other events that are coming up in the area, and that we have City of Lone Tree. They have photography presentations that they've been doing on Fridays. I think it's one Friday each month. And I wanted to go to the one they had, I think it was last month, on a sports photographer focused on baseball. I couldn't make it. I had something else going on that night. I've talked to a couple other people who went to it and said it was fantastic. There's one coming up March 8th. It's Friday, March 8th, and it's Changemaker Speaker Series is the series that they have. And that one's going to be Through the Lens, Hidden Worlds with Jody Cobb. We have some information that's out there on the Lone Tree website. I also included the link on the last email that went out to our members. And also, if you go to the City of Lone Tree website, they have further information on that one. So again, that is Friday evening, March 8th. Another one that we had on our a workshop on Western photo workshop that went out on our last email, and that is with Stockline Photography. And that is out in, I believe it's in Wyoming, Bighorn Mountains. Oh, no, I think this one was in Moab. It was out towards Moab. Okay. And that is, do I have the date of that? It's in March, right? Yeah, March 22nd, 24th to 24th. So it's a 3-day workshop.
They said they were offering a 2-for-1.
2-for-1 for members of Lone Tree. So they're offering that to us. So again, refer to the last email that went out that has some information on that one. The last thing I also wanted to mention is there's another, for those that are interested in portrait photography, the group Professional Photographers of Colorado has a workshop. Chris Knight, this is a lot of times on portrait photographers, you don't see them with a lot of Instagram followers, but he's one of the ones that has, I think, 150,000 Instagram followers. A book, Chris Knight, here's the book that he's got out. And it's going to be a workshop on dramatic portraits, and it's a 2-day workshop, March 9th and 10th. Reach out to me if you want any information on that, but we also have that out on, there's like I said, the group Professional Photographers of Colorado. If you look up their website, there's a link out there on that workshop. And that one's going to be up in Denver at the Embassy Suites Hotel, March 9th and 10th, 2 days. I want to also just go over real quickly when I mentioned that our next competition is a themed competition that is motion and leading lines. The other 2 themed competitions that we have this year, one will be July 3rd, and that's going to be on environmental portraits and high key. So again, it's 2 different themes, so you can submit either of those 2 images that fit either of those 2 categories. And then October 2nd, that one is going to be, the themes on that one are light painting and macro. The competitions outside of those themed ones are open, much like we just had on the competition that we had earlier this month. With that, I'm going to go ahead and we've got some awards from those who participated in the competition that we had 2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 weeks ago. So I'm going to start off with the beginner intermediate color. We've got the Judges Award goes to a new member, Tamara Rimply, for A Little Birdie Told Me. Congratulations. I believe she scored a 10 on that image in that, and there weren't too many of those that were given out that night. So congratulations, first time entry. We've got first place is Jim Reitzema with Tower Arch. Second place, Aaron McConnell with Laundry Day. Third place, Olin Jones with Nature's Cool Fire and Ice. And for the honorable mention, we have also Olin Jones with Houston, the egret has landed. We'll keep those ribbons here set aside. Let's go with the advanced color category. And we have in that one, we have the Judges Award, and that goes to Elaine Graves with Those Shoes. And again, she used some of the lighting on that I'm sure she will be sharing with those who are going to be attending the workshop.
No, I am not.
Not quite done yet. Let's see. We have first place. We have sitting next to me here is Candy Herman with Frozen Breakfast. Congratulations. Second place, also still sitting next to me here, is Candy Herman with Dual Focus. Third place, Peter Rondinoni with Land Time Forgot. And honorable mention, Bruce Norman, You Talking to Me? The next category here, we have beginner intermediate monochrome. And we have Judges Award is Bruce Ryman, Swirling Surf. Okay, there you go. We've got first place, Olin Jones, Finish Well Every Day. Second place, Tony Lazzari, Wheelie Nice. Third place, Bruce Ryman, Swirling Surf. And honorable mention, Aaron McConnell with Rainy Night. Last category, Advanced Monochrome. Let's see here, we've got Judges Award is Elaine Graves, Stand Tall. Congratulations. First place, Carino Zaragoza, Dying Trees. Second place, Jane Richards, Walking on the Beach. Third place, Bruce Norman with A Face Only a Mother Could Love. And the last award that we have here for this evening is the honorable mention, and that's Peter Rondinoni with Danger Zone. Okay, so that was the award. Congratulations to all those that won, and thank you for everybody who entered. We had, like I say, 115 images in that, so those awards were well deserved. Next, I want to go on to again with tonight's presenter, Paul Malinowski. He's been a photographer since college, nearly a century ago is what I think he said, but I know that's not true. Since 2020, however, he's focused almost exclusively on bird photography. His wildlife photos have been exhibited in juried shows like Lake Charles, Louisiana, Conroe, Texas, Louisville, Colorado. And most recently, 2 of his images were selected for the 2024 Top 250 Showcase of the North American Nature Photographers Association, NANPA being the acronym for that. He also has an image of a white pelican that was published in the November-December 2023 issue of Colorado Outdoors magazine, and his image of a hooded mercanser, I should learn how to pronounce these birds, eating a giant crawdad in the 2024 issue of the Lark Bunting magazine. His website is www.birdstreetphotography.com. He can be found on Instagram at that symbol Paul Malinowski Photography. So with that, I'll go ahead and we'll turn it over to Paul. I'm sure I left out a lot of things on there and that, but we'll turn it over and look forward to your presentation tonight. Learn more about bird photography.
Thanks, Michael, and thanks to Bruce and Dave for inviting me to do this tonight. Took a leap of faith. And thanks to all of you that are here for showing up, and those of you on Zoom. I see we've got quite a few people, and some of my new photography friends, some of my old photography friends, some of my patrons and supporters. And speaking of old friends, I even see some from college. And I was thinking about that on the way over, that those of you that are my old college friends that are on the Zoom, could you believe that if 50 years ago we were sitting in Goody's Bar in Beloit, Wisconsin, and I said, hey, 50 years from now, you guys are going to watch a presentation on bird photography that I'm going to give on a Zoom call. Of course, the first question would be, what the heck is a Zoom call? And then the second part would be, we'd all have a good laugh over that, me included. But here we are. So this is wildlife storytelling through a bird photographer's lens, tips for beyond basic sharp focus. Okay, so what will we cover tonight? Well, the main part of what I'm going to talk about are what are subjects that make a good wildlife story. And by the way, yes, I am a bird photographer, so 90% of the photos tonight will be of birds, but they're all of wild birds, and you will see some non-birds. And then I'll talk about, so how do you get those subjects and what the 4 elements of how to capture a good wildlife story are. I'll do a couple of bonus topics real briefly of wood ducks and sandhill cranes, just because those are 2 of the most unique birds that we have here in Colorado. And then a little bit about ethics of wildlife photography. And then we'll get into nerd talk. And by nerd talk, I mean, you know, the photographers that want to know about camera settings, which are important. And then I'll give you some guidelines and 6 tips plus a bonus tip for how to take the shot. And this is for whether you use an iPhone camera or the latest mirrorless camera, or you're still using a film camera. So So again, the way I've structured this is the main part of this at the beginning for quite a while is sort of a 30,000 foot look at this. And then, as I say, I finish with more technical things. So those of you, your friends, my friends that are on this that aren't photographers, if you jump off at the end when we get nerdy, I won't feel slighted or insulted. So, and questions and answers. So I don't monitor the chat when I do these. Bruce is monitoring that. Likely your questions will get answered in the nerd talk part of it, but shoot the questions. I've given Bruce carte blanche that if he needs to jump in and ask me something to go ahead and do it. I may wind up saying that we're going to cover that, but if at the end, maybe we can do a few questions and answers. So let's start with what storytelling is. Well, there's a definition that I saw and I embellished it, that it's a narrative in prose or verse, and then, or pictures I added, designed to interest, amuse, evoke an emotion, or instruct the reader, or in our case, the viewer. So it might make you say, huh? Or it might make you laugh. Or it might make you say, aw, or it might make you say, ew. But either way, any of those ways, it stirs your emotion and gets you interested, and it may even instruct. I like to say, if you want to think about, could you caption it? You probably have a story, assuming your caption is more than just, that's a bird on a perch, or that's a bear standing in the woods, right? So hopefully you're going to see, and this is a little wordy at the beginning, I apologize, but then I'll be bombarding you with good photos. So stay with it. So the roots of wildlife photography storytelling, for me at least, comes in street photography. And street photography is a genre that I think a lot of us know, but let's look at that definition. So I found this online, I really like this. Street photography is a photographic practice of shooting people in everyday life in everyday environments. These photographers commonly aim to capture spontaneous moments of people in a candid state. Street photography is typically not directed or staged. Rather, it is unmediated and spontaneous as to capture subjects in their most authentic state. And let's look at who some of the famous street photographers were of people. And probably one of the very first is Henri Cartier-Bresson and Vivian Maier, some incredible stuff. Elliot Erwitt, who just passed away a couple months ago in his 90s, phenomenal street photographer. And of course, Diane Arbus. So how does that relate? Well, I can tell you, I have been influenced over the years by a couple of photographs of these people. Number one is Bresson, and this is probably his most famous, called Behind the Gare Saint-Lazare. And this street photography image is about 100 years old, which is kind of hard to imagine of how he even took this photograph. How did he get it? And you know, the story here obviously is the man jumping with his reflection. Is he going to land in the puddle? How deep is that puddle, et cetera? And there's actually a lot to this photo, and we're not going to analyze the whole thing, but interesting, last Friday, the president of the Lone Tree Photo Club, Dave Purcell, pointed out to me something that I hadn't even seen in this. And if you look at the poster sort of in the left corner, well, on the left-hand side, there's actually sort of a reverse mirror image of the man jumping and with that motion going the opposite way. So just kind of interesting story. Fast forward about 50 years to, which means about 50 years ago to, or maybe 40 years ago, Elliot Erwitt. And this famous photograph of his called Umbrella Jump. And again, fascinating story, more than one story probably going on here. And those two photographs, I've always tried to look for, how can I emulate that in wildlife photography? And as long as I've been trying, I think I finally got what I wanted last November. And this is I call it Heron Jump. This was in Caddo Lake in Texas. And this was very early in the morning. In fact, the sun was not up. And this heron was literally jumping between trees. It was not flying, it was jumping. And it just reminded me of that. So I processed it in black and white. It was there was no color to it anyways, and gave it sort of an analog feel. So you can see then how I've sort of used street photography of people in my wildlife photography. And what's the difference? Well, it's the same as street photography storytelling, but it's with trees, bushes, water, and the sky as the animal's very busy streets or sidewalks. So like traditional street photography, you may be familiar with the location that you go to as the photographer, but you can never predict what scenes will unfold. To me, that's what makes it so exciting. And if there's one point I would want to get across tonight that you take with you, it's this, that the stories are more important than the location or the species. You don't need to go to Alaska for bears. You don't need to go to Africa, the savannah, for the wildebeest run. You don't need to go to Costa Rica for all the really fancy exotic birds. Not that I wouldn't like to go to any of those places, right? I'd love to. But the point is, 90% of my photos tonight are within a 5-mile radius of my house. So, and they're not staged, they're not set up, they're not photoshopped in terms of compositing. And I have nothing against people doing that, but it's just my thing. I don't do it. I obviously will increase exposure or bump up color a little bit, that type of thing. But I try and make it more journalistic than artistic, if you will. So what are the locations I go to within that 5-mile radius? Now, I'm lucky where I live. My backyard is one. And now, do I live on a green belt? No. In back of my backyard is a car dealership and a plumbing supply house. So that's not exactly an exotic backyard, but you'll be amazed at a couple of things I've gotten. There's a little pond in Littleton that I bet a lot of people don't know about. It's called Ashbaugh Pond. You're going to know a lot about it by the end of this. Stern Park. I know some of you know about Stern Park. That's a little park in downtown Littleton, and it's also called the Wood Duck Park. South Platte Park, which is a bigger park. It's a regional park right on the Platte River. And then I, again, am lucky that Chatfield State Park is within about a 5-mile radius for me. So again, 90% of the photos you're going to see are all taken there. So don't have to go to all those places. So let's jump in with what are some of these subjects that I've got. Now you'll start seeing some photographs. Reflections is one of my favorites, and a reflection can mean a mirror image of a subject, you looking in the mirror, for example, or it can be an abstract image of the surroundings that get reflected back into the water, or you think of the term reflection as self-analysis that we do. And so I was lucky here I got this American white pelican doing some reflection. At least to me, that's the story, that he's really sort of looking into the water and, reflecting maybe on his life. I don't know. But I got a kick out of that. And I was lucky. This is at South Platte Park. And this pelican should have migrated long before. Pelicans are here between April and November generally. This was like in December, so I don't know why he was there, and he just stood there for hours. And I have hundreds of photographs of the pelican standing and not making any movement whatsoever. But then he bent over and looked at this, and I was lucky enough to get it. And here, sort of the same thing. This red-tailed hawk is looking in. This is at Stern Park, and he's just looking at himself in the water. And you've got the reflection in the water, you've got the self-analysis, and you've got the sort of marshy reeds that are at Stern Park also reflected in. And there's a little story beyond the story of this, and you may not know this, but red-tailed hawks hate water. Eagles love water, as we know. Hawks hate it. And the fact that this guy just walked into the water was amazing. And again, I just followed him at Stern Lake. I didn't give up. I've got other photos of him, but this is the keeper. Here's another reflection in terms of, to me, the story here is, this is Nat. Nat is my favorite black-crowned night heron. He lives in the summer on the Platte River. And although he fishes on the Platte, he goes to this spot and he just stands for hours. And to me, again, the story there is, he's just reflecting on things in life. And I was able to, because he's so, we'll talk about settings, but I can tell you right now that because he stands there so rock solid still, I was able to use a very slow shutter speed and get the motion of the river behind him. So he's looking at the river as whatever the river represents goes right by him. I look for two or more. And two or more, whether that means two of the same species, different species, two males of the same species. And the possible results you get from that are things like discussions, and in quote, but I don't know, maybe they are real discussions. You could get some aggression. You could get signs of friendship, courtship and beyond, meaning actual mating, or what happens after they mate, you get the babies. Or you may get, and this is one I always fascinated with, either symmetry or dissonance. And again, I'll have examples here of each one. I'm just showing you this ahead of time, and then we'll come back to it. So let's start with discussions. I love finding little baby barn swallows that are siblings. They will yell at each other for hours on end. So go to South Platte Park in June. There's about a 10-day period where baby barn swallows leave the nest, but they don't actually fledge. They just go out on a branch and they sit on the branch, and mom and dad bring them food. And I could sit there and watch them for hours, and actually I have. These two are royal terns. This is actually in the Gulf Coast. And could you caption this? Yes, I could come up with half a dozen, I think, pretty funny captions of this. These are Bohemian waxwings, which some of you may know that last winter we were bombarded with an eruption of Bohemian waxwings, which happens maybe once every 20 years. And I have tons of photographs of them, but this is one of my favorites just because look at the intent discussion above the bird in the front. And wouldn't you love to know what they're talking about? And we could probably caption that. Eagle pairs are always fun to get together because eventually, and if it's a pair, it's their mates. You won't generally find two males of eagles hanging out together. But they're probably, somebody suggested they're a married couple and they're having a discussion. So, who knows? Yeah. These two, not exactly sure. These are different species. So you have what's called a tricolored heron on the left, and this is a snowy egret on the right. And could be the snowy egret has his feathers on top up, so could be a form of aggression. I didn't see them attack each other, but they definitely had a discussion. And then this is, again, the Bohemian waxwings. They're really maybe not having a discussion, but this is the last shot I got of the Bohemian waxwings. It was right at the end. This is the very last light that day. And I call this last call. And speaking of my college friends, this reminds me of my college friends and I at Goody's Bar at 1 a.m. getting that last drink in as fast as we can. So aggression, my backyard. Crows, listen for crows being loud, crows and magpies. Yeah, because chances are they're doing what's called mobbing another bird or an animal, and you'll see that shortly. So this crow was mobbing this red-tailed hawk, which I was able to get right from my yard on an overcast day, so I just turned it into a high-key image. And then this is also, I was sitting out back having some coffee, and I heard some magpies going crazy. And they were mobbing and harassing this red-tailed hawk. And if you can see, and I don't know if the caption is, "Excuse me, sir," or if it's something more aggressive here. It's whatever you want the story to be. And how that magpie is still alive is beyond me. But I'm always amazed that the hawks don't go after these magpies. And there's another example of it again. If you hear magpies screeching, look around because there may be a hawk nearby. And I call this one a sneak attack. Looks like he's about ready to jump on him. Two males of the same species, especially if you can see a female nearby, get your camera ready because might look like they're just out having fun, but I can tell you the male mallard on the left has told this male mallard on the right to get away from his girlfriend. And, it makes for a fun shot when they do that. This, you might look at this and think, gee, shouldn't that be in the friendship? I can tell you this is the only time I've ever intervened in nature. These are male mallard ducks. This is one of my few shots at Kettering Park, which is actually also within the 5-mile radius. But I happened upon these two that were fighting, and male mallards will fight to the death. You can see the one on the left is pulling the feathers out of the one on the right. And, I shouldn't have intervened. It was a parental instinct. I ran over there. I told him, "You two knock it off." And I remember a woman standing nearby looking at me like I was crazy. And I shoot them away and they ran this was in the parking lot, believe it or not. There's kind of like, gang fight almost. Let's take it outside. And then they finally went back into the water. They trash talked each other in the water for another 5 minutes or so, and then finally gave up. And with this, these are two male snowy egrets. If you can find two male snowy egrets together, and I did, and every year I do. In fact, for the last few years, there's been 3 egrets that tend to migrate up here and live this is in Ashbaugh Pond, which again is, if you're local and you know where Lee Gulch Trail is, it eventually goes into Ashbaugh Pond. Just out of sight in this photo is a female, of course, and these two males were sort of showing off to her. And this is the way they try and woo. They jump up as high as they can, and I guess whoever jumps highest gets to be the boyfriend of the female. Now, speaking of aggression, look at these two. To me, the story here is I would not want to run into these two in a dark alley. Would you? So, and I can tell you, these are red-tailed hawks. This is on the Platte River. And what they're doing is they're looking at a bald eagle that's on the next telephone pole. So I got my camera ready because I know, and hawks and eagles will coexist, but if there's 2 hawks, well, now it's in their favor, right? And they didn't want that eagle on that next telephone pole. So they started one of them flew over there, gave a little warning to the eagle, who gave a warning right back that he wasn't going to move. And then a few minutes later, the other one came and showed its talons. And this eagle stood his ground, and he did eventually leave, and they did not actually fight. They tend to do this. It's kind of rare that birds will actually fight, but they do like to just kind of scare each other off. And this one, so when I saw this pack of wild turkeys here, they were coming down the trail of the on the South Platte River. I started humming the tune to West Side Story for this. Doesn't it look like they're just out to no good? And I got down on the ground as low as I could, so that it gives a little more the perception that they're a little bigger than they are, but they were plenty big. And I also found out later that wild turkeys can be aggressive, and even towards photographers. So maybe I was lucky here. They kind of left me alone. They did give me the stink eye, as you can see. But then on the other side of the spectrum, we have friendship. And this is a cormorant on the left and a snowy egret on the right. And that summer, it was a couple summers ago, these two were inseparable. And it was just so much fun to photograph them. This is at Stern Park. And here it really looks like the cormorant's putting his arm around the egret, and I don't know if he's consoling him or just, you're my good buddy. But I love this photo. And here we have three amigos. That's a black-crowned night heron on the left, cormorant and snowy egret, again at Stern Park. They joined forces to fish. They're sort of synergistic with each other. Cormorants tend to swim more and they stir up fish. So if you see a cormorant with an egret nearby, get ready, because the cormorant will still stir the fish up. Sometimes they'll eat it, but then if the egret sees it, the egret will grab it, or the black-crowned night heron would grab it in this case. And this, I was real curious to see what would happen. So these are two different species of herons. This is the black-crowned night heron on the left and a great blue heron on the right. Black-crowned night herons don't live in Colorado year-round. They migrate here in the spring and leave in the late fall. Great blue herons do live here year-round. Some of them will migrate, but a lot of them live here year-round. This is at Ashbaugh Pond, again, last April. And what the story of this was, I watched, they were on either side of the pond, and they kept walking to the end of the pond. And I was really curious. I had no idea what do these two different species of herons think of each other. Will this be a fight? Will one leave? And it was a really sweet scene. It was almost as if, and this was the first day I'd seen a black-crowned night heron last year. And it was almost as if I saw them just like look at each other like this for a long time. And it was almost as if they were communicating like, how was your winter? Where'd you go? What'd you do? So I really liked that scene. And, we all need a friend to lean on, don't we? And again, the famous Ashbaugh Pond, which, by the way, is probably no bigger than this room. Well, maybe twice. We'll double this room. So you can get really close on these photographs. These are giant snapping turtles. You can't get a sense of scale here, but I can tell you that they're about 3 to 4 feet in length. They are seen every few years in this pond. They mostly live in the mud at the bottom of the lake. And they came out, you'll see another example of them here, and you'll see why they came out. Not this time. They were actually out maybe half a dozen times in the spring, or I'd say, yeah, late spring, early summer, and got a number of good shots of them. And again, a friend to lean on. We've got two muskrats here. They were scurrying around, and I saw that one just looked really tired. He just came over to the other one and just started leaning on him. The one on the bottom has his eyes open like, geez, Fred, you're going to do this again? But just kind of a cute shot. Speaking of cute shots, owls are always adorable. These are siblings. And, unfortunately, in the real world, in the natural world, siblings, when they're really young, don't always get along. In this case, they really do. And shout out to my shooting partner, Shelly, who I know is on Zoom on this, for finding these owls, and basically every owl shot I've got in this show. She's definitely the owl whisperer. So courtship and beyond. These are called hooded mergansers, if you don't know. And these are males, the two up front, the black and white ones. And courtships, to me, always tell an interesting story. And here you've got, that's the female in the back. This is at Stern Park. This is right after the wood ducks leave. When the wood ducks leave, the hooded mergansers come, which is kind of a nice transition. And male hoodies, as they're called, just love to show off, and they're courting a potential mate. I can tell you in this particular case, she wasn't the least bit interested in either one. They both struck out, but hey, that happens, right? We've all been there. Look for, again, if you got two, now these are called killdeer. You may be familiar with them. They live here year round. They're shorebirds. You'll find them on the Platte River or Chatfield. They make that really high-pitched, whiny sound. But if you see two of them, and just two of them, there's a good chance that they're mates or potential mates. And they start their courtship dance with this. And that's the male in the back. And the female and the male both raise their tail feathers up. And then what happens is the male sits down. And what he's doing is he's making a mock nest. Killdeer make nests in the sand and rocks so that they can camouflage their eggs. So for whatever reason, we don't know all the reasons why these are done, but the male makes, like I say, a mock nest for just a few seconds. If the female is impressed, then they go to the last stage, which is the actual act of mating. And if you see them, I can tell you, the first time I saw this several years ago, I thought, oh, how cute. He's giving his friend a ride. And, maybe it is giving his friend a ride, but not the way I thought at the time. I've learned a lot about bird behavior, by the way, from Cornell University has incredible online classes that you can take. And you don't have to get admitted to Cornell, although I always brag now that I'm Ivy League educated. But if you pay your $89, you too can get Ivy League educated by taking these online classes. And it really helps to know behavior, because then you can anticipate. Let's go back to these turtles. Again, courtship. That's why they came out. I sent series of photographs of this to South Suburban Park, which manages Ashbaugh Pond, and that was they came back and told me that that's what they're doing. It's hard to tell, although in this one you can see a little more that this is maybe more the traditional, but they typically just back on this one, what they're doing is they're side by side and they're rolling over, and they're actually mating. Ducks are fun to watch mating. And with these are called common mergansers. This is also in Stern Park. And typically watch for the female duck start swimming really low. You see how she has her head down like that. She'll follow the male. It's the male on the left. and she's signaling that she's ready to mate. And this guy took him a few minutes to catch on, but he finally did. And once they do, it was kind of strange watching. Again, nature can be a little cruel. It's not what we're used to. But the male gets on top of the female and starts pushing her head underwater. And, I was thinking, is he gonna actually drown her? And later on, Cornell also has a great website called All About Birds. It's not free, but it's fantastic, allaboutbirds.org. And I read that happens, and every once in a while, a female duck does drown. These are mallards. Also, it's stern. Mallards have a little different foreplay, if you will. They bob their heads up and down. So instead of swimming low, they're both bobbing. And if they're both bobbing, get your camera ready because this will be the next scene. Kestrels. Kestrels don't have anything specific so a kestrel, by the way, is a falcon. It's the smallest falcon species there is. And they're pretty frequent at South Platte Park, as well as Chatfield, but they're oftentimes on the wires there. And I knew from, again, taking bird identification courses that that's a male on the left. It has the spots. The female's on the right. It has the stripes. So, and again, if it were two males, they wouldn't be sitting side by side like that. But if they get really close like that, get your camera ready, because in the next shot, again, they've started the actual mating process here. Now, this is beyond courtship, right? This is just, to me, the story on this is just so adorable. Ironically, I took this shot at Ashbaugh Pond on Mother's Day. And this mother was so proud. We followed her whole nesting and egg laying, and she laid like 7 eggs and only 1 hatched, and that was it. And the parents, and the geese are terrific parents, mother and father, were just so protective of their little one, and it was just adorable. And so the nice thing about storytelling is you can have terrible photographs. This is an awful photograph, okay? And you'll see when I give you these tips by what I mean. Violates every tip. But you have 2 owls in a nest here. And so it's sweet, isn't it? And actually, if you look right under that big branch underneath there, there's actually a baby owl in there. And so, gee, that's sweet. Even though there's branches, you can see that there's 2 owls, and, it's nice that mom and dad sit there. Well, actually, what you're seeing is only the second time that I know about, from having read, researched this, that this is not mom and dad. Male great horned owls will not go in a nest. And in fact, the dad was seen off to the side. That's what they do. The dads always sit near the nest, but will never go in a nest. These are 2 moms. They're co-mothering the babies here. And the only other time I think was like in Nevada or Utah, something like that. And this was here. I'll just say it's in the South Metro area. I'm pretty protective of nests. So I talked about symmetry and dissonance, what I mean by that. So when you have 2 together, well, you might get something like this. These 2 American pelicans that showed up on Ashbaugh Pond and were sort of keeping an eye out together. In fact, just one eye out together. And you may have the newest Olympic event, which I wasn't aware of, called synchronized sleeping. And these, some of you would believe that. No, I made that up. So these 2 teals sitting on the South Platte River, right under the 470 viaduct, hardly picturesque, but just a fun story there. And here we have, again, perfect symmetry of these two sandhill cranes in flight. And this is in Monte Vista, where they come right about now. Dissonance is when one is very different than the others, and you can't have more different than, it looks like a snow goose. It's technically called a Ross's goose, very similar to a snow goose. That was, I can tell you, I have other photos, but obviously I have to limit it somehow. But this one Ross's goose was in a pack of about 500 Canada geese and really stood out, obviously. Another subject is mood. And you can have something like this with a great blue heron. It just gives a mood of being cold, being alone. So here's another mood. Very recent, again, without my friend Shelley, I wouldn't have found any of these. Not Photoshopped. We were able to get this owl right after sunset, but the clouds in back were lit up. And if I ever write that bad British mystery that I plan on writing, it was a dark and stormy night, this will be the cover of the cover jacket. And this is, reflection, but just the mood here. It's like, if I need to reduce my blood pressure, I'm going to look at this for about 10 minutes, and I bet my blood pressure will go down. Mystery is a great subject when you're doing wildlife. This little black-crowned night heron just peeked his head up over the rock there. And ironically, I was on the river looking for him. This isn't Nat, this is a different one. And I was looking for him, couldn't find it, but I kind of felt like somebody was watching me. And sure enough, that was him. And sometimes you feel like a tree is watching you. Now, what does that have to do with wildlife? Well, let's see here. For those of you on Zoom, I'll come back. I'm using a laser pointer to show you an eyelid that's open. This is an owl in here. And on Zoom,
Right.
I don't know if you get, no, I guess, no, you wouldn't see that, but that's okay. Yeah, there we go. Use that cursor. There's the eye. That's a screech owl. Very rare for here. Shelley and I have been chasing this guy. Last night, he flew right over my head. I didn't even see him. It was pitch black, but sense of mystery here. What's the caption here? Snowy egret finds Loch Ness monster, right? And if you want to know what this is, you already know. It was the tail of that snapping turtle, one of those snapping turtles. This is how we first found it, the tail sticking out. And it was the egret that was like freaking out. So fun story there. One of my favorite mystery shots is from Caddo Lake last fall. This great egret here is looking into the forest at the very first stroke of light. And, what's in there? Should he go in there? Is he thinking about it? It really evokes a sense of mystery. The mystery here is, will this tiny little pied-billed grebe actually eat the fish? And we don't know from this one photo, so you'll have to wonder, but I'll give you a hint. It sucks to be a fish, especially that one. In this mystery, when I saw this, I was sort of mortified, and I thought this bird was drowning. And it looked like it was trying to swim upstream in the rapids on South Platte Park. Took the photo, learned later, this bird is called an American dipper. It's the only songbird that actually swims. And so it was not drowning. And in fact, it spends most of its time swimming in rivers. There's a sense of mystery. What happened to this guy, this bald eagle? That is at South Platte Park, one of those lakes that was iced over. He had been standing on it, fell through. And so again, if we just leave it as is, you'll always wonder whatever happened to him. I'll give you a good spoiler alert. He climbed out. Subject of comedy. So look for funny situations to anthropomorphize, and nature and man juxtaposition creates a lot of those anthropomorphic funny stories. And anthropomorphize just means assigning human qualities to animals. And so this is Carino, who's here. This is the shot I dedicate to you because I only got this. I mean, I'll tell you the story behind it, but obviously private driveway, no access to Chatfield State Park, and this bobcat is making sure that there's no access to Chatfield State Park. But I was actually shooting eagles, 2 eagles in a tree, and I heard magpies going crazy, just absolutely crazy. But instead of looking up, they were looking down at the ground. And what it was, they were following this bobcat that was in the bushes and popped out to there. He was about 10 feet away from me, gave me that look. After I took the shots, I went home, I changed my underwear, and it was quite an experience. Signs are great, aren't they? I love the juxtaposition of an animal, whether it's bird or bobcat, on a sign. What's the story here? What's the caption here? Is the caption new security patrol at Chatfield State Park? Or is it that this raven is thumbing his nose or his beak at the fact that he's not supposed to park there? I don't know, but you can, that's the thing about storytelling. You make your own caption. In this little story, so Ashbaugh Pond has, and that's actually, some people, that's how they know it, that there's this metal sculpture of a great blue heron sitting in the pond. And what happened one day? A real great blue heron flew in and stood next to it and you can see he's flying in, and he had his wing raised. And I had always hoped that a great blue heron would show up, and one day it did. And he's pointing to that one as if he's saying, "That's fake. That's fake." And I waited
That's good.
until he went around, and then he came back, and I love this story, right? I mean, you could caption this forever. Art imitates life, life imitates art. These two, again, Ashbaugh Pond, it has a little island in it. And these two are, unfortunately, now, this was not man-caused, but obviously a construction cone is man-made. There had been a flood, and that's why the cone went out into the lake on the island there. But I love the expression of these two, like, "Bob, did you put this here?" No, I don't think so. This one takes a little bit of looking at. Why would I have a guy in a motorboat? This is in a reservoir in Texas. Well, look at his passenger in the back. It's a brown pelican. And there is a story behind the story that's too long, but it's just fun to, again, the juxtaposition. You wonder, does he know? Is that his pet? And those are questions we did ask this guy about him. And it doesn't always have to be 2 or more. Sometimes this poor muskrat was surrounded by a bunch of ducks that were quacking like crazy. And I mean, honestly, I was doing the same thing with my hands, and then I saw this guy doing that. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't blame you. Sometimes birds or animals will have some food that they think you want. He's looking at me like, "Don't you dare." This is in my backyard as I'm sitting in my coffee, and this is my moth. And little does he know, I really don't like moths to eat. This is a female hooded merganser with a hairstyle that is to die for some people, right? Especially, I'd say, punkers, old punk rockers. This little chickadee was just jumping up and down, and I don't know what he was on, but got him as he was doing that, and I captioned this yippee. Cormorants are some of the funniest birds, I think, to watch. If you get a chance, watch them, and especially when they start singing, because they do not shut up when they sing, and they just go on and on. Now, there is a not so funny part of this shot, which leads me to the next part. And if you look in the lower left-hand corner, you'll see fishing line. And that becomes unfortunate in some of the stories that I have. Here's a red-headed duck. It's a beautiful duck, and it's sort of rare for here. And I found it struggling one day on the shore. This is in South Platte Park, and I zoomed in and I could see had fishing line all around it. Struggled and struggled. I came back the next day. It appeared that it was the same, because red-headed ducks are so rare. Found him in the same place, and it appeared he was rid of it. But not all are so lucky, as you'll see. And this cormorant, this is kind of hard to see. For those of you here, look in the wing here. It has fishing line all around it, and it looks like it's tied its wings. Those are secondary wings that have, compared to the secondary wings of the, secondary feathers of the other wing, and you can see they're damaged. And this guy was like in February of last year. Well, cormorants shouldn't be here in February. Once in a while, you'll see one. And yes, he could fly, but I'm sure his migration was thrown off by that. And in this very sad case, the story here is, again, man's carelessness. Maybe this was an accident. I know, I used to fish. I understand some things, fishing lines break off, lures break off. If you can see here, again, for folks in Zoom, this is a lure that got attached to its beak, but it must have also ripped its skin over here. Sad to show this, but that's something to be careful about. And this is, I believe it's a juvenile wood duck. They look a lot like the female wood ducks in Stern Park that found a little toy, but it's plastic. And I was just mortified that it was going to try and swallow it as food. He tried, and for a long time, fortunately, he didn't get it, and he gave up and, left it somewhere in the water. So hopefully another duck didn't come by and get it. But and this tells an interesting story, but it is a little bit of a story beyond a story. So the lower left-hand corner is a great blue heron. And this is at Hudson Garden, which is also in a 5-mile radius. But I didn't put Hudson Garden on because, as Shelley and I found out the other day, most of Hudson Garden is going to be closed until May. They have 2 ponds there, and they have a lot of birds, both in the ponds and on the ground. This pond is currently being dredged, and so they completely empty it. They're putting in new drainage systems. It really disrupts. I will say long-term dredging is good from what I know. Stern Lake gets dredged every so many years. It's been a long time, but it's good in the long term. But they're very sad. This great blue heron lives at Hudson Gardens. I don't know now if it lives there, but about 6 months ago, it actually moved in. And you'll see some other photos of mine of it. So bonus topic, I talked about wood ducks at Stern Park. We all like to get the reflections in October. The iconic shots are good, but stories are better. So here's a typical iconic shot. There's really no, the reflection is really cool. And that's a nice thing about Stern. It has those trees behind it, and you get phenomenal reflections in there. But if you can get a story and get those reflections and those colors. So here's the story. You could kind of sit here and maybe come up with your own story. You've got the 3 three guys, those are male wood ducks, and the one on the right, which is also a male wood duck. If they ostracized that one, why? It looks a little different. Well, I just so you know, I can tell you the one on the right is what's called an eclipse male wood duck, an eclipse duck. Eclipse ducks are ducks that have bred during that season. So they lose their fancy feathers. The guys on the left, think of it, somebody told me once, think of that as the three on the left are single guys out for a night out. And the one on the right is the married male. So he's probably a designated driver or the wingman. Haha. Oh gosh, nobody got that? Oh, all right, now you did. All right. Zoom, I hear you laughing. You people got it. Anyways, and then it's interesting. This last fall was last October was interesting at Stern because rarely any female wood ducks there. Those three were always there. And but because there was no females there, they weren't aggressive. And what you see here is now, you know, with the mallards, you saw that being aggressive. This, they're preening each other. And again, you could come up with some cute captions for this. He's doing it again. I mean, it's so much fun to watch. So if you get two together, watch that. They love to eat the crab apples, and that's what we love. We love to get them eating that. But we also, I think, love to get them in flight. They're hard to get in flight. There's a way to get them. There's a way not to get them. This one's landing, and that tends to be the easiest way to get them when they land back. This is the very last shot I took of the very last wood duck I saw all season. Just incredible that I got this. So we're going to talk about ethics here in like 30 seconds, but one thing about Stern Park in October. So this on the right here is the crabapple tree. Crab apples will fall. You don't need to go over there and shake them, as I've seen some people do, okay? This is the metal sign here, and right there where that snow is, you know, of course, in October, there's no, well, usually no snow. And unfortunately, that's where the wood ducks like to come up from the lake. They hop up here, and they walk over and get the crab apples. I'm sorry. I've seen many a time a good half a dozen photographers sitting here because we want to get the shot of the wood ducks flying up into the tree. Well, sometimes that'll happen. This last fall, it didn't. Those particular wood ducks didn't fly to the tree. They flew back from the tree. That's how I got that one flying. But they would walk up there. But if you're sitting there, whether it's one or six of you, they won't go eat. And so, and you'll see when I get into ethics, I talk about leave them alone, right? Let nature take its course. And so please, if you do go in October, I've hopefully shared some ideas with this, just respect that. I took this shot sitting on these giant flat boulders, which are great. They're actually better. They're a better vantage point. So go there or go back where that park bench is, and that gives them, enough room to get up to the crab apples. Oh yeah, the sandhill cranes, just real quick, just a couple. If you get a chance, go. Right now until late March, it's phenomenal to watch. We all know, all of us that are local know where Hampton Avenue is. Get on Hampton Avenue, drive 3.5 hours west, and you're there at Monte Vista Wildlife Refuge. The best shots are getting them either eating, courting, or flying. So here I was able to get three. I call this three heads are better than one. Here is the beginning of the courtship dance. It's sort of iconic, but it also tells a story. And this particular one, and you'll notice it's got a stick in its mouth. So oftentimes that's apparently how they impress. I think it's the males that do the stick. They both do the dance, but the males offer the stick to the female. Apparently that's, you know, like giving them jewelry, I guess. I don't know, but hey, it works for them. Who am I to judge? And this is the more iconic courtship dance. Um, Part of the problem with sandhill cranes is they congregate so much, it's hard to get them separated. If you can get them off to the side, two of them, and watch and see if they start bobbing up and down, and then they'll start jumping up and down, and they both do it, male and the female. And you can see this guy actually just let go of a stick out of its mouth. And if you can, early in the morning, the better. The fog off the water there as they take off is just stunning, I think. Now, okay, that was the main part. Let's go to what are the 4 elements of how to get a good storytelling image? Well, knowing the behavior, I talked about that a little bit, having patience, having luck, and yes, you can make luck, and technical skills, which is how we'll end this. So just to go a little bit here, I'm going to go a little quicker on patterns. For example, this is a kingfisher. Kingfishers are really well known for being hard to get. They're skittish. They are very fast, extremely fast. But a pattern of theirs is when they leave a branch, they go down and then go out. So I had my camera down, not out, and I was able to get it in flight. Here's at Stern Park, they do the opposite when they go to a tree. They land, they go up. So again, I was able to get that pattern. Look for, and this is how you can get some really cool shots too with eating for herons and egrets, because they all do the same thing. They stare at the water, they stretch their neck out, and then they calculate where that fish is, and then they do a quick snap. And the thing is, have your camera start taking the picture as soon as you see this. This is the staring and the neck starting to extend. It actually is sort of a S shape. It's also got a nice reflection there. And this is where immediately, and what they're doing is they're calculating a refraction factor. You know, when you go in a swimming pool and you see something in there, or you're in a lake and you see something, it's not where you think it is. There's actually a refraction factor that where you're seeing it is not where it actually is. They somehow instinctively can do that. And they snap real quickly, and this guy was successful in the sequence. This is an actual sequence from, this is the great blue heron at Hudson Garden. Black-crowned night herons do the same. They don't have long necks, but they stare and snap. And this guy was successful. And he also did a little shimmy, which was kind of fun. This was at Hudson Gardens. If they have to, they will oftentimes flip the fish. And if you're doing it again at the beginning and you've got it on continuous shooting, you'll get a shot like this. And it's not always fish. Sometimes it's a giant dragonfly, as this snowy egret did. Again, other patterns on it, it's the same. And a suggestion I always have that I do sometimes is I put the camera down and I just observe what's the pattern going on. And that's how I was, this guy kept catching fish. So I just kept watching and I was able to figure out they move, they catch it perpendicular to their beak. So they have to keep flipping it until it goes parallel to their beak so that they can swallow it. And this kingbird with this grasshopper was doing the exact same thing. Barn swallows, again, this is when, the parents are feeding them. It's just so much fun to watch. They have a definite pattern. And you'll hear the baby barn swallows. This is mom coming in to feed one of them. And they just start, and they just have this really distinctive sound. You can't miss it. And as soon as mom feeds one and leaves, and actually dad feeds them too, then they get quiet. And feather fluffing is fun to do, like with wood ducks. Wood ducks, typical, almost any duck, will just start doing that thing where they take short dives into the water and just like 7, 8, 9 times, and then they stand up and they do this with their wings. And that's where you can get some of these incredible feather shots. Egrets don't dive in, but they start preening. And almost inevitably during the preening stage, they'll either do this and make those funny feathers, or they'll be a little more elegant. And they do this kind of a spread, which is to me just gorgeous. And bald eagles, also when they preen, are fun to watch, as this one was, as well as this one that was just shaking himself. It gives a whole different sort of story to it. And then this is a juvenile bald eagle. And I think I captioned this, Carmen Miranda stands on a tree. And those of you that are older will remember who Carmen Miranda is. So patience and perseverance. I left it, it's a dangling E there, not good. But I always think of this saying from Wayne Gretzky, and I'm not comparing myself as the Wayne Gretzky of photography, but somebody asked him once why he was so great. And he said, I skate to where the puck is going to be, not where it has been or it is. And that's the same with wildlife. And that means waiting and anticipating where they will come to. And you know what? More than 50% of the time I'm wrong. But when I'm right, like this, I waited over an hour for this shot. I knew the heron, I knew its pattern. This is in South Platte Park. I knew that I was going to get the golden hour here, and and I knew he wouldn't leave till the golden hour. And I got the shot I wanted. And Dave, you should know this shot. You bought the print for this for your mother or mother-in-law. Luck. Can you make luck? I believe you can. And I heard a saying once, skill breeds luck. And I really like that because it doesn't cause luck, but it breeds it. Think about sports teams. Think about how New England Patriots, best team, unfortunately, in football for many years, was always lucky. And my beloved Chicago Cubs, which was the worst team in baseball for at least 40 years, make that 100 years, was never lucky. Why? Because they were terrible. So the more skilled you are, the more lucky you will be. Be in the present moment, be open. I can tell you that Great Blue Heron shot where I waited 2 hours, the sum total of this took me 3 seconds. I happened to be holding my camera. I saw this little American goldfinch in front of a sunflower, took it, and that was it. So, you can be lucky. Wildlife photography ethics, underlying principle, what I want you to think about. Be Hippocrates and be a libertarian. And I'm not being political here, but Hippocrates, we all know we've heard the Hippocratic oath, do no harm. A libertarian says, leave me alone, right? So with any wildlife, that's what we want to do. We don't want to bait even food good for wildlife because it could change their behavior and it could put them at risk. It may expose them to a predator. It may change in birds migrating. They may not be able to get a prey. They may become, used to, that's always the big fear. They become used to humans. Don't scare an animal away from a perch or an area. No drones. It's used for research. Perfectly good. Let Cornell University do that, but not for wildlife. And birds may think you're a predator. So keep a respectful distance. Lower your camera frequently. If you're doing birds, actually any wildlife, use your peripheral vision. Don't stare them in the eye, especially with birds. Birds will think you're a predator. Bears might think you're a prey and ready to eat you. So, be careful. Nests always need extra space. Watch for agitation. If you happen to take photographs, use a 700mm lens, please. Crop heavily. Eagle nest by law, 330 feet. Think of the football field. Think of being at Bronco Stadium and being looking at the south stands from the north stands. When in doubt, refer to the Audubon Society as a great ethical bird photography set of guidelines. And you know what? I went over them as I was doing this, and they apply to any wildlife. So really good. Camera settings. Let's finish here with the nerd talk. So I like to use all manual. And you don't have to. I know a lot of people will say, well, I use auto ISO. They'll maybe lock in on shutter speed or, depth of field. That's fine. I just find if I use auto ISO, it's always either too bright or too dark. And even though I use spot metering, I know because I've been doing this for so long now, I know what settings work. If I can give you one technical tip to take with you, those of you that are hardcore photographers with, mirrorless cameras or DSLRs, use those custom function buttons on the top. Learn how to use them. Now, I'm a Canon shooter, but I know Nikon and Sony have custom buttons. I preset them. I preset them for 4 different situations. So I use the C1 through C3, and I use the manual as a 4th preset. So instead of fiddling with, I was just taking a bird's great blue hair or that black-crowned night heron standing there like a rock, and now all of a sudden an eagle flies by. Well, instead of changing the settings, I simply move the custom button. Takes a little getting used to. Have I gone from C2 to C1 when I meant to go from C2 to C3? I'd be a millionaire for getting $1 every time I did that, of course. And I set these each time I'm out. So different lighting conditions or different what I'm trying to shoot for. So don't just, change them once and then leave them there. Typical minimum shutter speeds, bird on perch, 250 to 500, an active shorebird, I use about 1/1000th. Large bird in flight, 1/1600th of a second, again, minimum. Small bird in flight, 3200th of a second. A hummingbird, you need 5,000th of a second usually. But also get creative with long exposure. Think about that. You can do a 1/15 second in pan. And here's some examples. So this is actually, I got home last night from getting flown over by the Eastern Screech Owl, and I opened up my current issue of Birdwatcher Digest magazine, and this photo was in it. And the reason it was in it is the prior issue, and by the way, it's a fabulous magazine, and not just because I had an image in it, but they have a wonderful photography editor named Bruce Wunderlich, and he wrote an article about how to freeze wings on birds. And I wrote in and I said, yes, I was, that's great, but I sometimes like to put motion in my birds in flight. It makes them more interesting. It tells more of a story. And I sent this in and they printed it with my letter. So that was kind of cool. And admittedly, that was a total accident. I was photographing an egret standing. I had the wrong settings, and I saw that finch in a tree. This is in Stern Park, and thought, wow, he's so pretty. And the second, with small birds, the second they see the lens, they're out of there. And boy, did that work out. Same with this red cardinal that I got. I like having wing motion. This is probably about a 15th of a second. I panned on this. This is Ashbaugh. This is not Photoshop, nothing. It's not intentional camera movement. It's just panning. It's a technique that I'm sure a lot of photographers are familiar with. Again, long exposure here so that I could get the river flowing. Might have blown out the highlight a little bit on this egret, but I like the story it tells. Some other technical things about using I use high-speed continuous. People ask me, should you use electronic or mechanical shutter? It really doesn't matter. The electronic shutters are getting better. They do sometimes cause some distortion. They're getting a lot better, and they are silent. So if you're doing any wildlife that you think might hear the mechanical shutter, switch to electronic. One, again, camera technical tip that if you really want to get proficient, you got to do this. Use your double back button focus. I won't go into the whole thing, just Google that or YouTube it, so that you're using the eye focus and the standard autofocus. If you're doing small birds, you have to have both. Now, taking the shot, This is last parts here. So these are guidelines. I didn't call these rules, right? I call these guidelines. And they're universal to any type of wildlife and any type of camera. You got an iPhone, you got Nikon Z, whatever. These are all the same. And point is, they're inversely proportional to the quality of the story. So remember I showed you about the two owls, right? And interesting story there. And I said, terrible, I violated all the good guidelines. Well, if I had no story, I better have good technical technique in my shots. So again, meaning if the story is great, the guidelines aren't as important, but if the story isn't as great, the guidelines are important. Okay, here's the 6 tips, and this is the end. Yeah, eye in the sky guideline. All right, and what do I mean by that? All right, I missed this one. This is the great blue heron at Hudson Garden. Was up in the tree roosting for just before the night came. It's really a cool shot. You know, when it's on my big monitor, the texture is amazing, but I missed the sun being in its eye. And the sun is elsewhere. So your eyes go to the sun, but it's sort of a boring part of the heron. To me, this is much more powerful. I've got the sun going right into its eye. There's actually a little catch light there in there, and it shows off that he's really starting to do his nighttime roost. Tip number 2 is what I call the 180-degree guideline. There's an exception for feathers. I'll show you that. It helps you to avoid, at least in bird photography, what's called bird bud. So this is my very bad, this is why I was not an art major in college. I drew this, but wanted to show you basically 180 degrees means something is perfectly perpendicular to your plane of view. And so this duck here is 180 degrees. Now, this is the northern harrier that I took a couple of weeks ago at Chatfield. As you can see, it's pointed away from the 180. It's probably about 210 degrees. Not a good photograph, in my opinion. But here, I got it at exactly 180. I would like it, and you're going to see another version of this sequence, actually, where it is closer in. It's less than 180, but at least it's 180. So that's better. Here's that feather exception I'm talking about. This is probably at 210 degrees, something like that. And yeah, it's the back of the bird, but it's in some birds, it's the outside of the feathers that are striking. So who cares about that guideline? And if you're in some competition and a judge says, oh, you got the back showing. Well, they don't know what they're talking about if this is the star. And the back feathers here are the star. Tip number 3, leave breathing room so that the subject appears to be entering the photo, not leaving it. What do I mean by this? Hudson Garden great blue heron, totally missed this. I totally missed this shot. I mean, it's pretty, he's sharp, he's in focus, he's got nice wings, nice texture, but he's just almost out of the picture. All right, there's something not pleasing about this. Whereas in the next picture here, same thing, sharp feathers, there's plenty of room for him to fly into, right? And so if he's looking to the side, you want to leave as much room as possible to the side he's looking at. Tip number 4, don't cut off the wing or the feet if you can, or where the feet should go. And I'll show you this, unless it's intentional. So what do I mean by that? Another one in the sequence. I was excited when I first got this. Man, he was sharp. I got him flying up, the wings up, nice reflection in the water, and I cut off the wing, the back wing. Worthless, except for showing you a bad shot. But here's the good one of that. So I got its feet, I got plenty of room, it's breathing to the side. But here's one where I purposely cut off the wings and the feet so that it's something totally different, right? This is just showing you that it's just his head and the way, I love the way herons stick their neck out when they fly, literally and figuratively. I showed you this one before. How many of you, when I showed this to you, thought, Yeah, that's good, Paul, but you cut its feet off. So a lot of times you'll hear judges at competitions say, oh, you cut the feet off. Did anybody notice that when I was talking about reflections? If you did, you've got a foot fetish, and I highly suggest therapy. Yeah, it's the lighting, right? It's the story here. And so, but I will say there's a technique I use that I did leave room where the feet would go. So I didn't cut it off right, and with wildlife, you don't always get the opportunity to have the entire, bear or bobcat or bird, in perfect view. And yet you can have a perfectly good story with it. Tip number 5, subject separation guideline. What do I mean by that? I mean, try to have the subject that's the star of your story separated from others. I missed this one. This is that Ross's goose that then was in flight, but I got Canada or cackling goose right in front of it. So not a great shot. But then I did get it by itself. So it's just more pleasing to the eye to not have it obfuscated by another subject. And then, the last tip is eye level point of view guideline. So the closer you can get to the eye level, the better. This is that Northern Harrier. Nice shot. I got it in flight. They have beautiful feathers from the inside. I'm at the 180 rule. It's nice. I like it, but it doesn't compare, I think, to this, where it's eye level to me. The power behind the story here, and he's staring right at me. The closer you can get to eye level, up or down, the better. Bonus tip, last and least, and I'm finally saying it, sharp eye focus. Okay, nice to have, but you know what? Don't worry about it, because as a wise old photographer told me once, this quote, if the only nice thing someone says about your photograph is that it is sharp, you have a problem with your photograph. Oh, wait, that was Dave Purcell. All right, take off the wise part, but the old part applies. He told me that last Friday at Starbucks, and you know what? He's right. Even a broken clock is right twice a day, and Dave Purcell was right. And so that was, believe it or not, part of the impetus of this whole presentation, is that there's so much focus on eye sharpness. And you know what? I'm being a little facetious. Yes, I always try and get the eye in focus. But again, when you have a story, it may not be all that important. So I hope I've inspired you, or at least entertain you for a while. This is my information, how to contact me. I've been working on an accessible website for visually impaired. Yes, a photography website. I have a college friend, I don't remember if he's on here or not. He's been blind since birth, or since high school, I should say. And he's been working with me. And I've learned how to use readers for the blind. And I'm trying to make my photography website 100% accessible for people that are blind. So yeah, it's really it's been a passion of mine. And if Ford is on here, thank you. He's a snarky lawyer from Madison, Wisconsin, who pointed out to me, it takes a blind snarky lawyer, who happens to be a great friend, to point out to me on my website that I said, Bird Street Photography, photographs of Paul Malinowski. And I always thought that meant that those were by me. And he writes back, what are you, Alfred Hitchcock? Photographs of you? Who the hell wants to see photographs of you? And he was absolutely right. So I actually changed the title of this just a couple days ago, photographs by Paul Malinowski, as well as my website. So thank you. I don't know if Bruce has questions, or any of you here, or Zoom, or how you handle that, but thanks for the opportunity.
Well, there was one comment from a lady online that said she watched a male trying to drown a female in My Little Pond, BTW males have corkscrew shaped, you know what? And female anatomy has more than one entry if she wants to reject the male.
That's, yeah, I didn't go that deep. And you know what, I pulled out, I pulled out a photograph I had because I thought it was a little too violent. Ducks actually are known for raping females. And over the years, the way the females have evolved to handle that is they do have multiple internal organs to where they can direct the sperm of the male so that they can reject it and that they only accept it from their partner. And the commenter is exactly right. And I happened last spring to watch that in action. And I mean, it was kind of incredible. And the two males fought almost to the death again. But yeah, it's fascinating nature.
Any questions in the room?
What kind of camera and what kind of lens do you have?
So I use a Canon. I have mirrorless. Currently have the R6. When the R5, 2 or 1, 2 or the 1. They're going to come out with an R1. It'll be the R11. I'll probably get one of those. And I always tell people, you know, the camera, all the brands right now, these mirrorless cameras. I mean, for wildlife photography, if you can, and I know, you know, they're expensive. Not everybody can afford these, but get the mirrorless if you can afford it. World of difference because of the eye focus. And they have just incredible AI eye focus in these now. And they just get better and better. And so really doesn't matter. For lens, my go-to is a 1:500. And then I almost always use a 1.4 teleextender. If I'm using the teleextender, I don't like to go 2 because you lose too much light. And then you're shooting like at f13. And so, you know, that's just personal preference, but that's what I use.
The 500, is that the newer one for the mirrorless?
Yes,
model?
yeah, I should have said it's the R, for Canon, it's the RF. It's specifically for the Canon mirrorless mount. You can, you know, and again, not sure about Nikon and Sony, but with Canon, you can use an adapter so that you can use your old lenses. I started with that. I had an old Sigma 1:500, 150 to 600, great lens, but it just wasn't good on the converter, on the mirrorless. So I splurged for the 1:500 and well worth it.
What is your almost black and white instead of lots of color? Is that a particular species of that?
Which one was that now?
With ducks.
Well, the females are nowhere near as colorful as the males. So not a different species, right? It was probably the female. Yeah. And that's typical in the bird world. Females, sorry, are just not as colorful as the males. There are exceptions. Kingfishers, I showed you a couple. They have the females have more color than the male, but that's and it's, you know, for evolutionary purposes. It's so the males can strut and find their partner in the breeding time.
You have two back button focus. If one is eye, what's your go-to on the other? Which focus the effective?
So the other is the standard autofocus that, you know, just like that we all have on our DSLRs before the eye focus. Okay, I'm sorry, the animal eye focus came along. So one is just the standard and the other is for the animal eye focus. And the reason I do both, and I have them quick, you know, you've got muscle memory after you do it for a long time and becomes second nature, is especially for birds, a bird on a perch, the animal eye autofocus has trouble for a bird in a tree. It, you know, that when I added the screech owl, it'll start looking for a knot in the
Mhm.
tree. Oh, this is a nice big eye.
Hmm.
And it'll go right to that. So sometimes it's almost like using manual autofocus, if you will, you know.
Yeah. Let me ask it differently. Like, what are you picking for the other autofocus though? Is it like wide frame, spot, a small center group, you know what I mean? There's like
Mhm.
6 or 7
Yeah.
focuses you can pick.
I always use the smallest I can. Yeah.
Right.
Just because I do birds so much.
You don't use a multi-point. You just use a single.
Just use a single. Yeah. Really trying to get the eye.
One, great images to go along with the great commentary and that, the storytelling. I think as you put, I think we were all inspired and entertained by the commentary. And what caught me too is as much time and as you put into bird photography, the studying that you do through Cornell and some of the other things, in your case, it really shows how much that, all the research, the time that you put into it, that has given you the ability to anticipate that shot. How many times you said you sat there for an hour, you know that shot is coming and you know sort of what the characteristics are of when that's going to evolve and you're ready to press the shutter at any time. But it's clear just by the images that you've shown and so forth and that how much benefit there is to I think what you said with the you can get lucky or you can be a lot of practice gets you that luck, right? So no, that was real helpful. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
I really like the way you're shooting, you're showing, obviously you're showing birds. All those tips were wildlife in general, so that was
Right.
fantastic.
Right. Yeah, really, the vast majority of what I covered applies to bears, coyotes, bobcats, muskrats. What's that?
Your location.
All night, everything was local here. Yeah. Yeah. Except I had a couple of Caddo Lake and if any of you ever get a chance, you gotta go to Caddo Lake. Spring or late fall. So I was there first week in November. Believe there was those cypress trees were changing colors as you kind of saw. And it's on the Texas-Louisiana border. So some of the lake is in Texas, some is in Louisiana. It's a huge lake, but it has these little inlets, bayous, and so we hired a tour. We hired Captain Old Jigger and his boat, and this was sight unseen. And it was we were a little uncertain. This is my friends from the Madeline Island group. I met them about 10 years ago, and we go once a year, different places. We're actually going to the Midwest this fall, and we're going to do fall colors, birds, etc. So anyways, but Caddo Lake's just incredible, just incredible.
Oh, just at the, I don't know if you can say, just at the end, we're gonna go over our competition. Everybody submitted, just so we could see whose photos are being done by what, just a real quick run through. And Bruce has put this all together so you can see the names,
I think you did a nice job of it too.
We'll see.
Yeah. And this is something that a lot of times we do at the end of the competition, but we had 115 images and we were running a little bit tight on time on the competition night. But a lot of times we'll do that just so we can, with 115 images, go through and put a name to an image. So. Thank you.